Domestic violence is a harmful behavior that has negative impacts on all people, including women, men, children, the elderly, and homosexuals.
Domestic violence is defined as the forceful, controlling behavior that coerces a victim to do what the abuser wants without regard to her or his rights, body, health, or emotions. Types of abuse include physical, psychological, emotional, sexual, property, or financial. This generally refers to parties that are or have been living in the same household, especially immediate family members.
Currently, there are over 2,000 domestic violence agencies in the United States. The most typical service offered is shelter, hotel vouchers, or safe homes. Other services can include transitional housing, legal services such as assistance with filing a restraining order, practical services such as emergency transportation, counseling services such as support groups, and outreach efforts to publicize services and raise awareness.
A number of studies have begun to investigate the role of family conflict in the violence as a major environmental stressor that may lead to increased risk of transmissional of antisocial behavior.
Clients who enter the domestic violence service under the age of 65 are more likely to be Hispanic and African American. Older women victims are more likely to have less than a high school education and less likely to have graduated high school or completed college compared to younger women victims. Most victims, regardless of age, were victimized in their own home. 88% of older women and 78% of younger women. Younger women, 18 years old to 64 years old, were more likely to be victimized in the offender's home than older women. Among younger victims, there was 64.2% physical abuse, 33.9% emotional abuse, and 1.8% sexual abuse. Among older women, there was 48.9% physical abuse, 50.4% emotional abuse, and 0.8% sexual abuse. Older women are less likely to seek individual or group counseling services.
From the early 1990s, women's data started showing that the number of women victims of domestic violence was declining. Females are not only more violent than men in intimate relationships, they are also more violent when arrested. Women are more likely to commit acts of domestic violence if they have been abused in a relationship or as a child. Male victims are unable to get as much protection by the courts as females are. 73% of women seeking protection are granted protection, compared to 14% of men seeking protection. The most seen types of abuse among male victims of domestic violence are being slapped, hit, pushed, kicked, grabbed, choked, and threatened.
Intimate partner violence, IPV, is a known developmental outcome of early antisocial behavior. It may stress both parents and children on the level of parental emotional distress, parent-child interactions, and the interference with the development of children's stress reactivity. Abused children exhibit increased anticipatory monitoring in response to hostile impersonal interactions and greater difficulty regulating their arousal. These neurobiological changes are known to increase risk of depression and reactive aggression. Parenting practice represents a second possible mechanism for the influence of IPV on child psychopathology. There is some evidence that victimized mothers tend to be more impulsive and to use harsh punishment with their children. These types of parenting practices have been associated with elevated risk of internalized and externalized problems in children.
Domestic violence in later life describes situations in which an older person is subjected to ongoing abuse with power and control dynamics perpetrated by family members or intimate partners. Elder abuse is a common form of violence against older people, often committed by relatives or institutional caregivers known to the victim. so elder abuse may or may not be domestic violence. Between 1 and 2 million Americans aged 65 or older have been injured, exploited, or maltreated by someone on whom they depended for care and protection, and for every one case that is reported, it is postulated that 5 or more go unreported. By 2030, it is expected that 85 million people will be 65 or older, and 8 million will be over the age of 85. As our population ages and becomes medically fragile and/or cognitively impaired, increased physical, emotional, and financial burdens on family members, combined with increased vulnerability of the elderly person, can create a dangerous environment in which elder abuse is a potential consequence. Events such as children's departure from home or grandchildren's, retirement, one partner's illness, and increased mutual dependency associated with increased contact and friction, social isolation, and vulnerability change the form of violence in old age.
%14 of same-sex litigants are passed through by the courts for protection. Homosexual men experience higher domestic violence abuse than heterosexual males and females. Homosexual males between the ages of 20 to 24 and have good jobs are more likely to be victims of domestic violence. Homosexual domestic violence is reported less than heterosexual domestic violence. Most female victim call lines will not take calls about males being victims.
The consequences of domestic violence are far-reaching and have a significant impact on long-term health and emotional well-being of those affected.
The findings indicate that parents who have experienced IPV are more likely to feel dissatisfied with their children, and in doing so they may communicate rejection to their children.
No one, young or old, is immune to interpersonal violence.
Although it is possible that domestic violence against females is more common than against males, it is pointless to be determining which one is more important. Rather, it is more important to help victims and stop the violence. Research is now showing that not only is women victims of domestic violence like though before, but now it is becoming more known that men and homosexual couples are too.